Hello and welcome to Business Analytics Data Visualization. So data visualization involves creating a summary table for the data or generating charts to help interpret, analyze, and learn from the data. So this is quite straightforward, right? We are creating charts, meaning figures, which is visualizing the data set. This top one, that might not be that obvious, but basically when you create a summary table, meaning you're aggregating your data, which might be quite large. So by aggregating or summarizing your data and creating a table out of it, you are able to get the general and overall view of your data, okay, get an understanding of your data. And that's the purpose of visualization, actually. That's what we do in visualization as well. Instead of looking at a big chart like this with hundreds of rows with numbers, let's say 2 columns of numbers here. So what we do in visualization is that we want to see whether there's a pattern in the data, whether there's some relation between the x and y axis. So when you plot this, it can look something like this, right? So when you see this, oh, okay, then you can interpret this that there's a positive, strong relation, a correlation there. Okay, so out of this big table, a big data set, we are transitioning into a much concise version of the data which tells us a story. So let's take a look at the overview of data visualization. The term data ink ratio is an important term. So it measures the proportion of what Mr. Tufte terms as data ink to the total amount of ink used in a table or chart. So what this basically means is that we are representing our data by using ink, right? Both in a table or in a figure, we are putting ink on the paper, basically. So how much of that is really conveying the message, conveying the data, telling us something about the data, and how much of that is just some extra stuff that's added on top of it that does not add really any value at all. So data ink is about that. If your data ink ratio is high, that means there's more data than there is ink, more useful information provided. Okay, so let's take a look at this. So you can see here this table, right? There's a day sales, and then again day sales column. So there's basically 20 days in total, and there's some sale information. Okay, nice. Well, first of all, do we really need like all these horizontal lines here? Do we also need all these vertical lines here? Right. And another thing I see is that day is just one column, but when you present it in this way, it looks like as if there is like 2 columns. So this is not a good way of presenting your data. The data ink ratio is quite low here. All right. So the same data set, the figure here you see is a line chart. So directly I can say that, okay, so I assume that this is the day and this is the sales here, but these are not given. So the X and Y axis label are missing, which is not a good thing to do in when you create figures. And another thing is these horizontal lines, do we really need them? Are they adding any value? Another thing that's kind of bothering me is all these tick marks. These are called tick marks here. Do we really need so many? So maybe we can skip. We can do something like 1, 3, 5, and then put a tick mark there. So because we know that in between there is 2 and so on. So basically the data ink ratio is also quite low in this chart. Okay, so you see this is an improvement I see here. So basically by removing those horizontal and vertical lines, it's much cleaner now. The data basically, does not need those lines for us to understand what's going on. Still though, I don't really like this day sales and then again day sales. This is okay for this kind of a small data set because there's only 20 rows, and maybe the idea was, okay, let's fit it into this PowerPoint slide, right? So it's okay, but I would go with something like this. Honestly, I would go like day and then sales, and then maybe the first three values here, and then that, and then the last three values, something like this, and then corresponding sales values here. So this basically shows it in a very concise way. But again, of course, we can't see the values here. So if the purpose is really to see the values, then this is okay. Anyway, let's continue. So this is again an improvement on the figure that we just seen. The horizontal lines are removed, right? So that's a good sign. You can see all this X and Y axis labels. That's a good thing. We were seeing a legend here that was showing that this blue line was sales. So that's removed, and that's also a good thing because we didn't really need that. This y-axis already shows that this is sales, and so this line basically shows us how much of a sales has been done on each day, right? On each corresponding day. So these are the days here. Another thing, you see these like 2, 4, like 6, these are removed, and that's also a good thing because we didn't really need it. So basically the idea here is that when you create a figure or a table, do you really need that thing that you're thinking of putting there? Okay. Do you really need that horizontal line, that vertical line that you think is adding something, but is it really adding a value? Or if you are skipping something, you should basically assess whether that's a good thing or not. So here, skipping this X and Y labels. So this is the X label here. This is the X-axis label. Okay, this is the Y-axis label. These are not good. Okay, you should always include the axis labels so that it's clear to the viewer what the thing that you're presenting. Okay. Let's continue with tables. So tables should be used when the reader needs to refer to specific numerical values. The reader needs to make precise comparisons between different values and not just relative comparisons. Okay, so precise comparisons is the key term here. Relative. So in a figure, it's generally a relative comparison. So you see that there's a trend that's, one line is more than the other, one is bigger, another is smaller, and so on. So it's kind of relative, but you can't really see the exact value unless you put it on the graph itself, right? That was the figure we had on that line graph. So you kind of see that there's an increase, a decrease, and so on. But if you want to see the exact values, then basically tables provide more information in that regard, okay? Because we can put all the exact values here. The values being displayed have different units or very different magnitudes. So this is another thing. If you have several columns that you want to present in one single graph, if they are related, you can put them in a single graph. That's okay. But if they are on a very different scales, then it's not okay to put them in a single graph because it will be really confusing. It will be really hard to understand what's going on. So so something like revenue and maybe cost. Revenue and maybe if let's say cost is something like this, and probably their values will be close to each other. It's generally okay to show them in a single graph, and that might be more intuitive and more explanatory anyway. But on top of that, if you had the number of people working in the factory, okay, that's probably much less, right? It will look something like this. Now that's kind of confusing. So there are graphs where you have two axes. So this axis is showing one line and this other axis is showing the other line. That can be done as well. It's sometimes it's okay, sometimes it's not, because that can also be a little confusing. So you need to judge on that if you want to do that. Okay, so we have this Gossamer Industries here. So this is a table that shows the cost and the revenue of this company. Okay, so you see that these are the months, right? And at the end you see the total value. So this total is, the first one is the total cost, the second one is the total revenue there. And this is the corresponding figure. Now you see when in the figure you can't really directly see the exact value. You can see approximately how much it is. So this is somewhere in between 60 and 70. So it's like close to 65. This is a little more. So there's an increase here, then a decrease, then an increase. So you can't see the exact value, and basically that's also not the very purpose of a figure. A figure basically tries to convey the data in a concise way, and it's a good way to explore the patterns. You see these patterns here. So when you look at, let's go back to the previous table, you can't, you're right, you can't, by just looking at this table, you can't understand whether there's an increase or decrease in the cost or revenue. You can't see, you can't directly see how much they compare with each other too. But when you look at the values, you can see the exact values here. So 1 is 64,124 and so on. So you can see the exact values. So this is generally good if you are interested in exact values or like tax purposes and accounting purposes and so on. This is good for a manager and executive or for yourself to analyze what's going on, to understand the business, to basically, if you want to get a general picture out of it, right? Now, sometimes actually combining both can be useful, so you will have both of them together. Um, so you'll have both the figure and the table, like on top of each other. So this way, you can both see the trend and pattern and whatnot in the figure, but you can also see the exact values if you're interested in doing so. Okay, so this is the best of both worlds solution. And you see also this table is a bit different than before because there's less number of lines here, so it's a bit more clean, and the purpose is to increase the data ink ratio. Okay, so here you see there's the cost revenue, but we have also the headcount. So you can see that the cost and revenue are in the tens of thousands of dollars, whereas the number of people working is just somewhere between 8 to 10. So you see, if you were to put all this in the same figure, it will be very, very confusing. It wouldn't work anyway. It wouldn't be nice at all. So some table design principles: avoid using vertical lines in a table unless they are necessary, right? Unless they are necessary for clarity. Horizontal lines are generally necessary only for separating column titles from data values or when indicating that a calculation has taken place. So basically the idea here is that, okay, first of all, if you don't need the line, don't put it unless the line puts some value. Okay, let's say you have a simple example would be you have location 1 and then location 2 and then location 3. So you have some sales here from each location, right? So you might have a let's say total here at the end. So a nice way, let's say there's a sales of, I don't know, 25k here, 30k here, and 15k here. So what's the total? It's 30, 55, 60, 70. So 70k. So maybe a line like this would be nice. And let's say you have some more columns here. Okay, that might be cost here as well, and stuff like that. So it's nice to separate the location information from the total information. And this line does add a value. It makes it a bit more clear. So one looking at the table can directly see, okay, so there's like two separate portions in this table. One portion is this, showing information from each location, and one portion is this, showing information which is the total of these locations. Okay. Some different tables, the same data as we've seen before. So which one is better? Well, A and B are about the same. A lot of horizontal and vertical lines, too much, really too much to bear, just too crowded. The data ink ratio is quite low, and A is probably worse because you can see it's thicker. All these lines are thicker, so it's not very good. Design C is much better. There is less number of vertical lines, horizontal lines. Still, the question bears: do we really need all these vertical lines which separate the months? Now the months are so it's not like different entities. It's just month 1, month 2. So I don't think we really need all these vertical lines. But as I said before, there is this cost and revenue, and then there's profit. So profit is basically revenue minus cost. So it could be nice actually to have a horizontal line here that could separate these two information. And we can see that in design D. We have revenue cost and the profit is separated with a horizontal line. the vertical lines are gone. There's the month information. Again, the total is the total so this total here is the total of each month's cost, right? If you add it from left to right. This revenue total is basically the total revenue of each month. And then when you look down, this profit is basically, revenue minus cost. And you can see here again, revenue minus cost. So this total revenue minus total cost will give you the total profit from each month. Total profit when you add each month's profit, basically. Okay. One thing I can add here is rather than having revenue at the bottom, maybe having revenue on the top line and cost on the bottom, because it's revenue minus cost will give profit. That might be more intuitive. Again, this way it's also okay as presented here, not a big deal. All right. So this is a larger table. So here we have this table, right? We basically have each month from the company's different locations all aggregated. Now, when we separate them for each location, you see there are this many locations. So now we have more information shown in this table. Okay. We have each month in a column, right? And each location is a row. So the total at the bottom you see is the total of each month from every location. So when you add all these locations up for month one, you will obtain this information, which is the total revenue. The cost is basically the total cost from every single location when you add it up for month one, and so on for each month is created like this. So if you continue here, and it continues until month 12. So at the very end, you can see another total column, which basically shows the total of this first location. Okay, so the total revenue obtained in this temple location from month 1 until month 12 is $107,895, and so on. So that's for each location. So you can see now this is much cleaner table. So each month is separated by like a different color instead of drawing those lines. Making use of colors is also a nice way to make the information clearer in a nice way. I can see some vertical and horizontal lines, but they are not that many. First of all, it's the header is being separated with this horizontal line, so that's good. So this is the location. So to make it clearer, right, this total and the total revenue and total cost at the bottom is separated from this location information. That's also nice. This vertical line basically separates out these locations from the month information, which is shown on the right. So that's also a good addition to make it clearer what's going on here. And this final vertical line basically separates out this total column from the months, from each individual month. So all in all, this is a nice table. Data ink ratio is quite high. There's a lot of data being presented with the least amount of like lines. Okay, and it's clear. It's nice to look at. It's all good. So cross tabulation is a useful way to disseminate information where you have two variables, okay? And a pivot table is used in Microsoft Excel to create cross tabulations, all right? So let's see how that looks like. Okay, so in this table, we see some information about restaurants in Los Angeles. So it says there is 300 restaurants obtained from Los Angeles area. We can see the quality rating of each restaurant, the meal price, and the wait time. So this basically can be a data set where maybe it's it's not very clear what this data set is about, but my understanding is that it can be maybe one person going into different restaurants and ordering a meal based on the meal price and the wait time, and then the quality rating of the restaurant given. It's basically, this data can be collected, or maybe several people has done this. Anyway, that detail is not that important. It's now the idea that we are going to use this data to create a cross tabulation because right now, there's 300 rows. It's we have to, in a way, summarize this and aggregate the data to see what's going on. So when you do the cross tabulation, it looks like this. So the idea is we are getting two variables, which is the quality rating and the meal price. And then within the combination of each of this, like quality rating and the meal price, we want to count how many restaurants there are. So, for example, in the meal price ranging from $10 to $19, and there are 42 restaurants which have a good rating. Okay. Within the meal price ranging from $10 to $19, there is only 2 restaurants which have an excellent rating, and so on. So you see, we have taken 2 variables, and within the combinations of those, we are basically counting how many restaurants are within that category. Okay, so this is one way. You can do other things as well, but here we are just interested in how many restaurants are there. So I see a 0 here. This means basically for restaurants, for the price range of $40 to $49, none of the restaurants are in the good category. For that range, basically 6 of them are very good rated and 22 of them are excellent rated. Okay. Okay, so, and this is the larger version of that data set. Okay, so thank you. And next we will continue with how to create a pivot table.